Parks on the Air, an amateur radio favorite. You get out to a state park, you set up amateur radio, and you get to soak in the beauty while operating ham radio. Seeing who you can contact around the world becomes such a fun experience. But when you think about Parks on the Air activation failures, ones that don't necessarily go right, do you think maybe you forgot your equipment at home, or the HF ham radio bands were just lousy? Or do you think about something on a much, much larger scale? Definitely the most epic Parks on the Air failure I've had, possibly the biggest one I know of. One that only happens one time every 100 years where I was at. And today I want to share with you that Parks on the Air activation failure, and also tell you how W7HU LX may have inadvertently saved my life. Right now, Music Festival, April 2023, and I've been planning this one for a long time. I was really interested in getting out to Florida to get some sunshine as well as to see this music festival, and I really wanted to activate some parks, specifically Eula Johnson State Park, located on a peninsula near where I was staying, my Airbnb in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So a month prior to the whole trip, I went ahead and I started throwing out feelers online saying, anybody's welcome to do this Parks on the Air activation. Let's do a group meetup and have a good time. Not hearing too much from too many people, I was still determined to go activate the park. But the day before I went to activate the park, I reached out to W7HU and said, hey, haven't heard from you in a while. I'm going to be in town. Would love to see you. We're doing a group meetup. I got a thumbs up, and that was good enough for me. However, I went ahead and when I arrived in Florida, there was a light rain, which did quickly subside. And I made my way to my Airbnb, which I'd be staying at for a week. While I arrived at the B&B, the first thing I wanted to do was make sure that I had all my equipment ready for the next morning where I'd be going to the park to activate. So I checked that I had my radio, a TX500 by Discovery Lab 599. Check. An Xtena, switchable and fed half wave, which I wanted to test out. 49 to 1, 56 to 1, or 64 to 1. Got it. A LifePo 4 battery made by Dennis 86DM. Got it. We're good to go. I have all the equipment I need, and all I need to do now is get a good night's sleep. When I woke up the next morning, it was slightly raining, but that's not uncommon in Florida. So I quickly got dressed, got ready, and I found an Uber to take me to the state park where I would pay the pedestrian fee to get into the park, and I would try to find somewhere to tell everybody we would be meeting up. After getting to experience some of the absolute beauty of that state park, I finally did find a spot to activate, and to my surprise, I got a text from Alex asking where I was at. And when I told him where I was at, Alex was there within just a few moments, and I had already been making a couple of contacts here and there. But then we decided that we needed to go to a different spot because the spot that I was at was actually reserved. And as we moved to that new spot, I set up the antenna. It started to rain just a little bit more. Not too bad. But Alex was the one who showed up to the Parks on the Air group meetup. And as we continued to talk, I wasn't really making too many contacts. As time progressed, Alex did get on the radio and he got to try some Parks on the Air, which was awesome. And we had a great time. But eventually Alex said, hey brother, I gotta go. So with Alex set to leave, that would have left me alone at the Parks on the Air activation, and I had that option. I really did want to continue to try to activate. Already I had 6 contacts, my furthest one being the country of Suriname, and I did have contacts in North Carolina as well. And I'm being determined to activate the park as the rain continued to pick up wasn't an issue. Then there may have been a little lightning, and I thought, yeah, it's probably a good idea that I do try to get back home because it seems like the storm is picking up. And so Alex offered me a ride, and I said, yeah, sure, if you bring me to the ranger station, I'll jump in an Uber. After all, I didn't want to inconvenience Alex by having to have him bring me back to the B&B. But Alex wasn't going to accept that. Alex said, brother, I'm going to take you home. I'm not going to leave you somewhere. And those were his words exactly. And let me tell you, I couldn't be happier to have a friend who would make sure that I got home safely, because what happened as soon as I got home was absolutely epic. In fact, it's one of those 1 in 100 year floods that they talk about. As I arrived at the B&B and got situated, the rain did pick up as well as the winds, and now that I think about it, the ranger did tell me maybe I shouldn't be on the beach because of the tropical storm force winds, but a guy from Chicago area doesn't really understand what that means, or I refuse to process it. So then as the day continues, the water starts to get a little deeper and a little deeper, and I'm not talking like an inch on the ground, I'm talking multiple feet deep. In fact, this was, like I said, a 1 in 100 year storm where they measured nearly 25 inches of rain in the Fort Lauderdale area. The best thing I could say is that I did make it back to the B&B safe. I wasn't prepared at the B&B, which I do want to discuss as well. However, I think the most important thing to learn from all of this is to always be prepared and to have a plan. It doesn't matter if you're on vacation, soaking in the Florida sun, or if you're at home at a park you've activated 100 times. You need to have a plan, and that plan should include things like how much water should you bring. After all, I was surrounded by water, ocean salt water that I can't drink. I didn't have any food. These things start to play an effect and a factor because you don't think you're going to be gone for a long, extended period of time. And then you start to think about things like, well, where would people have looked for me if I did go missing? So maybe you need to have yourself an objective rally point, as we would call it in the military. Somewhere everybody can meet up if we get separated. And having a bag full of the proper equipment needed for certain situations given your environment. So for example, if you had one of those cool tactical backpacks, they're great, but they're better if you have more than just equipment in them. So make sure that you plan accordingly, whether it's a 3-day pack, a meal ready to eat, extra water, and all that good stuff. As I mentioned earlier, this park was on a peninsula, but what I didn't know at the time, and I didn't learn until way later, was that if you go north of this park in the peninsula, there's actually a college there as well as a Coast Guard center. That would have been very valuable information to know had I actually become stranded. I should also point out, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, that when I got back to the B&B, I didn't have any food there, and I had very little water. The reason for that was, as I'm the kind of guy who likes to shop for my food and my water for the day that I'm eating. Great for me, works excellent in normal circumstances, but when something happens, it's not a good idea. So take those things into consideration. But after all this is said and done, I didn't get to activate the state park. I did try to go back the next day. Lightning hit, and I said, I think I'm good here. It was a sign I wasn't supposed to activate the park. But why do I tell you all this? Well, I hope you learned a little bit about maybe the importance of preparing a little bit better. And even though a lot of us have military experience and training, sometimes we just let it go when we're in a relaxed state or a relaxed environment rather. And I think it's important for us to kind of always keep our guard and be alert. And this was a reminder for me. But more importantly, more than anything, did LXW7HU save my life? Well, he may have. I don't know. But more importantly than that, I really just want to thank him. In certain situations and circumstances, you just don't leave your wingman or your battle buddy behind. You make sure that they get in the vehicle. Now, Alex gave me the option, but I could tell that he wanted me to go with him. And after all, I need to listen to a guy who has done as much as Alex has. Alex, if you don't know, has escaped Cuba. I think Alex knows what's best for me in certain situations, and I have to be able to let go of my control to accept the fact that there is somebody who may know better in that environment. I also do want to give a huge shout out to my buddy Mike, and I won't give his call sign or his last name. However, Mike did reach out to me before he was on duty or just as he was going on to duty, and he said, hey, I just want to make sure that you're cool, man. I know you're out here, and this is some crazy storms, you know. Of course, I'm paraphrasing it, but that means so much to me. Thank you so much for contacting me when you knew I was in a foreign environment that I didn't know about, that you were more familiar with. And overall, the lesson here today is simple. Be prepared. Have good situational awareness, trust your good friends, and you'll know your good friends. And no parks on the air activation, no summits on the air activation, no amateur radio activation of any kind is worth your life in a normal circumstance. I want to thank you for watching this episode. I thought it was very important to give credit where credit was due to the guys who were there for me. But more importantly, it's okay sometimes to expose what your weaknesses were to potentially in the future help others. And I hope that this video might help you think about how would you prepare in a natural disaster, or what do you need to prepare for in the future going forward. And I'm kind of curious, what do you think is important to put in your prepare go bag when you're going out to an activation, as well as, hey, we're getting into tornado season here. What do you have at home for your preparedness kit? Thanks for watching the channel. This is Ham Radio Dude. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Mike.